Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the people who raise you are the very ones who break you. She was born into wealth, wrapped in silk and legacy, only to be dragged by her hair out of her own home by the people who were supposed to love her most. What happens when blood turns against you? When power and greed matter more than truth? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about survival, about reclaiming your voice when everyone else tries to silence it, and about the moment you realize no one's coming to save you. You'll have to save yourself. Stay with us, because the secret her grandfather left behind, it changed everything. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. They told me I was overreacting, that I was being dramatic, that I didn't understand how complicated family could be. But when your father drags you by the hair through the marble hallway of your childhood home, when your mother opens the door and calmly tells you to leave with nothing but a torn suitcase, you stop believing their lies. My name is Madison Blake. I'm 25, and just 3 weeks ago, I was an heiress to the Blake fortune, a $10 million trust, full control of Blake Industries, and the deed to the estate in the Hamptons. My grandfather, Edward Blake, left it all to me, not out of favoritism, but because he trusted me. He raised me. He taught me everything I know about business, integrity, and navigating storms on the sea and in life. Growing up, my parents, Charles and Victoria, were never really parents. They were appearances. They were press releases and charity auctions. They played the role of American aristocracy, always with Brielle, my older sister, at their side. Brielle was their golden girl. I was the afterthought. She crashed cars. They bought her new ones. I got straight A's, and my mom said, "That's nice, dear," without looking up from her phone. She got a Cartier bracelet for Christmas. I got a stainless steel water bottle, but my grandfather saw me. He called me Captain. He'd take me sailing every Sunday, teaching me how to read the wind, how to find the horizon, even in fog. He taught me about mergers, equity, corporate sabotage over grilled cheese and tomato soup. I was 15 when he first said it. "You're going to run the company one day, Madison, not because of your name, because of your mind." So when he passed and the will was read, no one expected what happened, except me. I inherited everything. Brielle got a comfortable trust fund. My parents got symbolic shares and personal items. The rest, company control, voting rights, the house, was mine. They didn't scream, not then. They smiled, nodded, said it would all be handled. And 1 week later, they did handle it. Dinner that night was quiet. The roast was cold. Then they slid a letter across the table, a letter supposedly from my grandfather written during his final days. It expressed concern over his own decisions, claimed I might have influenced him. It was a forgery, an obvious one, but they had a medical expert ready to testify he wasn't of sound mind. Gregory Tate, our family lawyer, nodded politely. "It's best if we resolve this privately, Madison." Then they cut off my company access, froze the accounts, changed the gate codes, and finally, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my father stormed into my room and told me to pack my things. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and dragged me down the stairs. My mother opened the door. My sister watched from the top step. No one said a word. He threw me out onto the driveway like I was a stranger. "You're not welcome here anymore," he said. Then the door slammed. I stood there, shaking, wet, alone. And then I remembered what my grandfather said the night before he died. His voice was weak but clear. "If things don't seem right, look for my message." I didn't know what he meant. Not then. But later that night, at my best friend Jenna's apartment, I opened the small pocket watch he always carried, the one I'd instinctively grabbed on my way out. And inside I found it. A hidden compartment, a folded note, a USB drive. The note read, "If you're reading this, then the worst has happened, but you are smarter than they know. This drive holds the truth. Find Richard Lawson. He'll help you. And Madison, whatever happens, don't let them rewrite the story. You are the legacy." I clutched the watch like it was a lifeline, because it was. What would you do if the people who raised you turned out to be the villains in your story? Would you walk away quietly or fight for the truth, even if it meant standing alone? That night, I thought I'd lost everything. I had no idea I'd just discovered the key to taking it all back. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the USB drive lying on Jenna's coffee table, like it might disappear if I blinked. She made tea, sat next to me, didn't push, just said, "Whatever's on there, we'll handle it." Together. I plugged it in. There were folders, dozens, each labeled, each meticulous. Medical records from Edward's actual physicians confirming his mental clarity up until days before he died. Video recordings of our business meetings, conversations where he asked me detailed questions about market forecasts, succession plans, and shareholder votes. But that wasn't what made my breath catch. There was a hidden folder titled Insurance. Inside, emails, voice memos, and scanned documents. Emails between my father and Gregory Tate, strategizing how to restructure control if Edward proved uncooperative. Records of hush payments to a doctor who had never examined my grandfather, but was willing to testify anyway. Notes from internal company meetings, plans to quietly sell off assets and cover the losses of my father's failed ventures, using the inheritance as a bailout. The worst part? A wire transfer. A wire transfer. $500,000 from one of the company's accounts to clear Brielle's gambling debt. One day after I was thrown out, I sat frozen. Not because I was shocked. Some part of me had known they were capable of betrayal. But to see it spelled out so clearly, like a blueprint for how to erase me from the life I was promised. I emailed everything to Daniel Reyes. He wasn't just a good lawyer, he was one of the only ones I trusted. He called within an hour. "This isn't just a civil case, Madison," he said. "We're looking at fraud, conspiracy, maybe even criminal charges." He advised me to disappear. Not hide, exactly, but stay quiet. No social media, no public appearances. "They'll come after you if they sense you have leverage," I nodded, numb. "They already have." Daniel arranged a meeting with Richard Lawson, the name from my grandfather's letter. We met in a quiet diner in upstate New York. He was older than I expected, with kind eyes and a voice that didn't rise above a murmur. "Edward always said you'd be the one to carry the weight," he said, sliding a small key across the table. "He set up a contingency, a safety net. Offshore funds, just enough to survive until the truth came out. That money, just under $2 million, saved me. It paid for legal prep, for the forensic analysts we needed to prove the letter was forged, for the private investigator who followed the trail Brielle thought she'd buried. We found everything. She'd been lying for years. About college loans, rent, stolen family heirlooms pawned off for cash. But the worst was who she owed money to. Men with names that made even our PI go quiet. And my parents? They were desperate, drowning in debt. They had used Edward's name to secure massive loans, confident they'd gain access to his estate. Without that control, their entire empire would collapse. It was never about love or fairness. It was survival. But what broke me wasn't the betrayal. It was what I found next. A journal, one my grandfather had kept. Richard gave it to me, tucked in a leather satchel with a single note. "Read this when you're ready." The entries started years ago. Some were simple, like, "Madison asked me why the boardroom table is oval." Others cut deeper. "Charles pitched again today, wants Brielle to take over. Said Madison's too emotional, but he doesn't see it. She listens. She learns. She leads." The final entries were heartbreaking. They're circling like vultures. Brielle's smile is hollow. Victoria stopped looking me in the eye. Madison's the only one who visits without asking what she'll inherit. He knew. He saw it coming, and he planned for it. I cried reading that. Not because of what he wrote, but because he still believed in them. Even after everything, he still hoped they'd do the right thing. And they didn't. Later that night, Daniel called with news. They've filed an emergency injunction. They're trying to freeze the estate, claiming you're emotionally unstable, that you're unfit to lead, that you manipulated Edward into changing the will. I laughed. Then I broke down, because this wasn't just about proving a forgery or defending a signature. This was a war for my name, for my character, for everything I'd quietly built in the shadows of a family that never wanted to see me shine. And they were willing to burn everything down to keep me from rising. If someone you loved betrayed you for survival, could you ever forgive them, or would justice be the only path left? The moment they questioned my sanity was the moment I decided to burn their lies to the ground. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, but the silence, a stillness that settled into my bones. I sat at the front beside Daniel, my palms flat on the table, hiding the tremble I couldn't shake. Across the room, my parents sat shoulder to shoulder, dressed in muted navy and gray like mourning doves, pretending not to have blood on their hands. Brielle sat behind them, eyes down, lips pressed together like she was holding in a storm. Judge Harrington entered without looking at anyone. Her reputation preceded her, sharp, unshakable, and absolutely intolerant of manipulation. This wasn't just another case. It was a spectacle, whispered about in the press and boardrooms across the city. They thought I'd disappear, thought I'd crumble under pressure. That's what people like them always think about women who don't raise their voices. But they forgot I was raised by Edward Blake. Daniel spoke first, presenting the video testimony we had saved until now. The screen lit up, and there he was, my grandfather. Frail, yes, but alert, present. His voice was clear, his gaze direct. I, Edward Blake, of sound mind and judgment, leave my estate and controlling interest in Blake Industries to my granddaughter, Madison Blake, he began, because she has earned it, not through bloodline, through character. He laid it all bare, his fears, his doubts about my parents, his hopes for me. It was undeniable, unforgettable, and for the first time the courtroom truly listened. Gregory Tate, now disbarred and facing charges, squirmed. My mother dabbed her eyes with the same monogrammed handkerchief she used at every gala. My father's jaw locked so tightly I thought it might snap. But the moment that cracked something in me came next. Peterson, our longtime butler, took the stand. He spoke quietly, hands folded. I watched Mr. Size Blake build that company from the ground up, and I watched this family tear each other apart for what he left behind. He paused. Miss Madison was the only one who sat with him in his final weeks. She never asked about the will. She only asked if he needed more water. He described in full detail the day they threw me out. The screaming, the dragging, the suitcase splitting open in the rain. I wanted to disappear as he spoke. I hadn't realized how humiliating it sounded when heard aloud, and yet I was still here. The judge called a recess before her ruling. I stepped into the hallway, needing to breathe. That's when Brielle found me. I didn't know about the video, she said softly. If I had, you still would have stayed silent, I replied, not with anger, just exhaustion. I was scared. Her eyes filled. They told me if I didn't cooperate, they'd cut me off. You know what I owe, who I owe. I know, I said. I also know you watched them hurt me, and you said nothing. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted you to know I hated myself, too. That was the thing about truth. It never came wrapped in bows. Sometimes it arrived late, bruised and broken, asking for more mercy than you had to give. I nodded. That was all I could offer. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrington delivered her ruling with the clarity of a sword slicing through fog. The court finds that Edward Blake was of sound mind at the time of his final testament, she declared. The document submitted by the defendants was forged. Control of the estate and Blake Industries is restored to Madison Blake, effective immediately. Then her voice dropped an octave. This court further recommends criminal investigation into the actions of Charles and Victoria Blake and attorney Gregory Tate for fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. Silence, then murmurs, then flashes from the press. My mother stood, her face pale. You've destroyed this family, she spat. No, I said calmly. You did that the day you chose greed over blood. They were escorted out. Brielle didn't follow. That night, I returned to the Blake estate alone. I walked the halls that once felt cold and empty. They didn't feel like mine, even now. Too many memories. Too much pain in the wallpaper. I packed a single bag, just the things that mattered. My grandfather's watch, his sailing cap, and the photo of us at the harbor where he called me captain for the first time. A week later, I sold the estate, donated a large portion to foundations that support survivors of financial abuse and family trauma. I moved to Boston, a modest apartment, a fresh start. The company needed rebuilding, not just structure, but soul. I restructured our leadership, created new ethics bylaws, and launched the Edward Blake Foundation to fund young entrepreneurs with integrity. We named our first grant the Captain's Seed. I wasn't just running a company, I was rebuilding a name, his and mine. 6 months passed before I saw Brielle again. She wrote a letter, said she'd entered recovery, that she was working at a nonprofit now. She never asked for money, just forgiveness, someday. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some wounds need more time, but the one letter I did respond to was from Peterson. He wrote simply, "I stayed too quiet. You gave that silence meaning." I thanked him, and then I let go. I no longer needed their apologies. I no longer needed them to understand, because I did. I understood that family isn't who shares your last name. It's who stands beside you when everything else falls away. And love, real love, doesn't make you beg to be seen. Months later, I visited my grandfather's grave. I placed the watch on the stone for a moment, fingers brushing the engraving. Integrity above all. "I did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "But not just for you, for me." As I stood in the quiet cemetery, breeze in my hair like an echo of those sailing days, I realized something. This was never a story about inheritance. It was a story about reclaiming your voice, your worth, your future. And sometimes the only way to honor where you came from is to walk away from it completely. What part of Madison's journey resonated most deeply with you? If you love this story, comment 100 below to let us know. Where in the world are you watching from? Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth, and thank you for watching Life Stories.